as these technologies advance, you really need to go back and say, what is the business really trying to accomplish? Not how do they do it today necessarily, but what is it that they're really trying to accomplish as a business? And how do we better support that with this new technology? So all the technology changes, but the why we're creating the technology really hasn't changed. And we have to just continually remind ourselves that we have to invariably go back to the customer and talk again about what they're trying to accomplish with their business. And if we'd never built anything before, what would we build now in order to solve this problem?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Meg and Amy show.
Yay.
Hey, Meg. So I was talking with my husband the other night, and I used the term snap the chalk. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, what is that? And I was like, well, it's just a common phrase. Look it up. And he looked it up, and there was nothing. And I was like, but I think it all the time. I say it all the time. Where in the world did I get this?
I know where you got it.
Where did I get it?
Oh my goodness. So welcome to the Hanging Out with Meg Too Long and intersecting blue collar roots with white collar professional jobs. So snapping a chalk line is done in construction. And it's actually quite satisfying. It's a little device that is like a string, and you pull it up and you drop it down, and it draws a perfectly nice straight line of chalk where you're likely going to cut or do some sort of true up. And I use it a lot because, first off, I think it's a very satisfying metaphor, but I use it a lot to articulate that moment where you're snapping something to show exactly where that true line is and to clarify where that line is for you. So that's probably where you got it.
All right, we're snapping the chalk. This is the end of this part of the project, and then we'll start the new phase.
This is the line, right? I use it a lot at like the end of a scoping phase or something like that. Let's snap the chalk. That's going to be the line, and therefore, and it's again because it's a metaphor that's super straight and super clear. You can't miss that line.
And it's snappy. It's punchy.
Yes.
Right.
And I recommend sometime that you find someone that has one because it's kind of a satisfying experience. So I'll try to find a video for you.
Not just saying it, but doing it.
But doing it, yeah.
All right. It's a little bit of maker's fare there.
Exactly. So, but apologies in advance. I have been had more than one person burned by taking an idiom that I have offered and using it with confidence, and sometimes that can be a little risky. My favorite one was when I mentioned that there was a particular feature that was to enable graft, and a non-native English speaker understood what I was saying but didn't understand my humor underneath it, and therefore reused it, and it was not well appreciated in the context. So it's always wise to be a little careful with Meg idioms. Yes.
Well, that was really fun. And today we will be interviewing John Wookey.
Which has nothing to do with graft but maybe some chalk snapping.
You might have some chalk. All right. Well, so John Wookey is a pillar in the enterprise software space. He's led strategy, product development, and organizational management for giant organizations across his 40-year career. Most recently, John led the procurement and network management product orgs at SAP, including Concur, Ariba, and Fieldglass. Prior to SAP, John held several roles at Salesforce, including the core platform development and Salesforce industries. For the HR-minded out there, John developed Salesforce's first HR application, Work.com, spurred by the acquisition of Ripple. John was also the overall leader for the applications division at Oracle, responsible for all horizontal and vertical products. He was responsible for a number of strategic acquisitions, including PeopleSoft, where Meg and I worked at the time, and we were very impressed from the get-go. John's a Cal Berkeley grad, and he has literally seen it all. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so weird to refer to you as John because I don't think I've ever called you anything but Wookie.
Feel free to call me Wookie. That's fine.
So, as a lifetime learner, I understand you're currently studying something entirely new. What are you studying? You want to share?
The last few years has been a lot of discussion about things that are threats to democracy, and it kind of got me thinking. And I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we kind of span the political spectrum, and we have a lot of interesting discussions. And at some point, I realized that despite my excellent work from my high school, history teacher teaching us about U.S. history and the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, I didn't really have a good understanding of it. So I did a few online courses that took you through, the Declaration of Independence, how it was written, who wrote it, why they wrote it, the U.S. Constitution, how that has evolved over time, what was put in place, how it was tested during the Civil War, what happened in the progressive movement when Woodrow Wilson came in and really started changing the way the government was run. What happened in the Depression and the war on poverty, and just how it's evolved over the years. And it's interesting because it really has changed quite a bit. And so when people talk today about threat to democracy, first off, I'm always amazed at how little our elected officials actually know about the way our government is structured and how it's supposed to be run. But it's just interesting when I talk to people, and I talk about why the country was founded, at least why the founders thought they were founding it, and how they wrestled with some of the challenges of building the Constitution and writing it in the right way. So anyway, it's sort of been the thing I've been doing, a sort of personal project over the last year, and it's been incredibly rewarding. And has absolutely nothing to do with technology, which is also nice.
Nice light fare in retirement.
Yeah. Well, it also gives me a better appreciation for some of the things that happen in this country, a little bit more context for some of the history we have.
It's interesting. I've been digging almost in an opposite direction. I'm a little bit more than halfway through the Silk Road, and it is a view of history that centers itself on Asia as opposed to centering itself on North America and or North Europe, etc. And I'm finding that is also enriching my perspective on what were the conditions going on at the time of the founding of our country. So when you're done with that section, I recommend the Silk Road as well.
Well, I think one of the things I would say we take out of this is that we have a bad habit of judging people, throughout history based on the perspective we have today without understanding their perspective. I think if most people from today were dropped into the world 200 years ago, if we survived for a week, it would probably be a miracle. It was a very difficult world to live in 200 years ago, and we should probably be a little bit more understanding of some of the decisions that people in that time made, because it was a very different world. And we have benefited from a lot of the things that the people have done, that got us to where we are today. So anyway, understanding your history, I think, is important for understanding where you are today.
I think that this is going to be important for the rest of our chat. But first, according to your bio, and as long as I have personally known you, you've always been an executive. I'm pretty sure you were born as an executive. Is that right?
I was not born as an executive at all.
Okay. Well, a darn good one, too. But how did you become an executive?
So, I started off like most folks. I started at Accenture, although it was so long ago. It was still called Arthur Andersen in those days. It was the consulting division. I was a staff consultant. And, we were put on, projects, and we wrote code and, took user requirements. And I was just we called us green beans at the time because we did these green books. And so we were sort of the staff. But, I did that. I went to work for a software company after that. Actually, I went to work for one of my customers at Accenture to lead their IT organization, and then ended up going to work for a software company and, sort of became sort of a contributor at that point, writing technology. But at some point, I was made a manager of one of the groups that I had been part of. And, I think I was fortunate at the time that, I had a really good boss, and she brought me into my office and told me I was being promoted. I was going to lead this group. And then she gave me a lecture about, it being a very different job, and I needed to do it differently. And it wasn't, it's good that I was a good individual contributor, but being a good manager was a very different thing. So it wasn't something I necessarily pursued, but it was something that, I think I was fortunate in that I worked for some very good people. I benefited from some great, managerial support early in my career, and it kind of got me started in the right place. I'd love to say that this was all sort of, part of a personal ambition I had, but it really wasn't. I think I was very fortunate to work with some great teams and some great companies. I mean, I worked at Salesforce and SAP and Oracle, and those are three pretty good companies to work for and gain some good experience. And I was given great opportunities and surrounded by great people.
We love to give shout outs here on the show. So this amazing manager that taught you all the early lessons.
Yeah, unfortunately, she passed away a very long time ago. But her name was Winnie Chun. She was the director of product development at a company you've never heard of called Ross Systems.
I've heard of it.
Okay, it was back in the days of building systems for proprietary operating systems. We ran on the DEC VAX line of computers.
I also worked on a VAX. Yes.
A great platform. Really enjoyed it. Liked working on it. Wrote a lot of code on it. And she was the leader of the group, and she spent a lot of time thinking about how to make the team better. And, that was like the biggest lesson. When I became a manager, she said, you really need to think a lot about your team and how do the people in your team get better? How do you align them in the right direction? How do you obviously you have to deliver product releases, but how do you do that in such a way that at the same time the team is getting better? How do you do that? And, everything from how do you run a meeting to how do you conduct one-on-ones to how do you do performance reviews, she spent a lot of time on. And she made sure I spent a lot of time on it. And when I did something well, she was great about calling it out. And when I didn't do something as well, she was great at very quickly giving me, what I think Sheryl Sandberg calls radical candor, right? So the idea of like giving someone feedback quickly and incredibly honestly in order to basically, improve their performance. So
I think that's Kim Scott's term and book.
Yes,
actually.
yeah. But I think she learned that from Sheryl Sandberg because she talks about her in the. I saw her do a presentation once. It was fabulous. But she talked about Sheryl Sandberg had that, radical candor kind of approach to giving feedback and hilarious stories. Like she's, I never worked with her, but I'm sure she would have been an amazing person to work with.
Yeah. Well, so you saw what good looked like early on and then modeled that the rest of your career. No wonder everyone wanted you to lead them.
Yeah, and she wasn't the only one, right? I mean, I've had a lot of good, managers and leaders throughout the year that I've benefited from. So
I think that's amazing, and I think it also reminds us all about not just how critical your first boss is, but also the people that help shape you. So, John, you've been someone that's helped shape me, and I have really benefited for multiple times having conversations with you at key points. One of the reasons that I wanted to chat today was I think we're at a moment where thinking about context and history really will help us as we look forward and say, what are the potential things that are going to happen next? And I think, right now I've been investing a lot in not only thinking about parallels in history to where we are today, but also the benefit of crystallized intelligence, the idea of having lived through some of these types of shifts and been able to navigate them. I'm just curious, as someone who has also lived through multiple shifts, talking about your first experiences in the VAX situation, and obviously having been hands-on in COBOL and other languages that have, people don't have experience in, and then also lived through multiple companies rising and falling. How has that informed how you see what's going on today? Where do you draw parallels?
So, it's interesting that early on at Oracle, we were proposing an acquisition of a company, and it was a company in the financial services space. We were trying to move into the banking industry, and This is a company down in Southern California. They had like four different products, a treasury workstation product, ALM risk management, a few other things that were going to be good complements to our portfolio. And we went and we pitched it to Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, and he just hated it. And we ended up buying it. He approved it in the end, but he hated it. He said this really amazing thing to me. He said, I hate acquisitions. And this was before the whole PeopleSoft and Siebel and all those things they got bought, which was sort of a different business strategy. But he said, I don't like them because they always use different technologies. And this company we were looking at like had four different products. They built four different ways and acquired a couple, right? So it was a real heterogeneous tech stack to be charitable. And he said the problem is our industry changes every 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's continually changing. He said, but there's big structural changes every 5 to 10 years. And he says, when you've got a product portfolio that everything is built differently, different architectures, different database technologies underneath it, different tool sets it's built on, different user interface, because when it changes, it's impossible to react to it. Like it's just, and so he sort of really hit, I mean, it really hit home with me that the only right answer to almost any question in technology is one, right? You need everything to be as simple as possible, like one architecture, one tech stack, one way of doing things, one approach, one, with cloud, right? One code line, like all those things allow you to innovate much more quickly and to adapt to changes that are either driven by the market or opportunities that new technology avail you of. So this idea of trying to keep things simple is really, really important because things do change all the time. The constant that I see in all these changes, because I mean, I can go back to kind of a scary level of talking about, flat file systems, proprietary operating systems, proprietary. IBM had like all these super mini computers, none of which talked to each other. They all had different operating systems, which is why digital was so great because it had VAX VMS, ran on the whole stack up and down, which was their big innovation. But things have changed. They went to Unix. We went from character to GUI. We went to relational databases. We moved from on-prem to cloud. AI is now going to fundamentally transform the way every application works. I don't think they're going to be applications anymore. They're all going to be agentic workflow. So like all of that's going to change. Here's what doesn't change: why we do it. Like in the end, we're still doing it for the same reason, which is our customers, right? The businesses that depend on technology and information to do their job better need these systems to accomplish their goals, right? So if you're a healthcare organization, you're trying to make patients better, or you should be trying to make patients better. Like if you're a university system, you're trying to educate students. If you're a bank, you're trying to better support your clients. And if you're a manufacturer, you're trying to build your products more efficiently, use fewer resources, get it to your customers more effectively manage your supply chain, right? All of these systems exist to serve a business. And I think, one of the things that happens when we get these new technologies is I always say it goes through sort of two phases. There's a incremental phase where we take new technology and apply it onto existing systems we've built, incremental improvements. And you saw that with even AI, right? Next best action, right? In the Salesforce automation system was how they used AI initially. But at some point, someone steps back and says, let's go back to first principles, right? There's the monastic thing, always we begin again, right? So you have to kind of, forget everything you've learned about how you built these systems before and think, well, what's the problem we're really trying to solve? Like how do we help a manufacturer be more efficient in their utilization of resources? How do we help them improve their uptime on the shop floor? How do we help them manage inventory to the smallest possible level while at the same time making sure they never basically have an outage that affects a customer delivery, right? So there's in the end a business problem that you're always trying to solve. And so when you have this new technology, so now we have AI, in all its forms, and we think about, well, how do we actually help a manufacturer achieve all those, in some cases, competing objectives? Like, how do we go, like, let's forget the fact that we've been building these systems for 30 or 40 years. If we hadn't built anything, what would we build today? And I think it's that willingness to both, leverage the deep experience you have in understanding the business problem, and then apply all this new technology, these new opportunities you have to solve it in a different way today. And by the way, Every time the technology advances, I think the requirement to understand the customer business problem even more deeply increases. Like, so we go from mimicking the systems they'd had in the early, like the first system I wrote, the first like AP system I ever wrote was a custom development. I pretty much just copied the manual system they had, right? They did this, they had this form. Okay, that form now becomes this character mode screen. It's exactly what I did. I didn't really try to rethink the problem in any way. Now, they got great reports they never had before and a bunch of other nice innovations out of it. But like really understanding more deeply, why do they do this? Because at some point it's like, well, why do we really need accounts payable when you think about it? Like we can 95% match everything. We ought to be pushing through things through payment. As much as I love Betty and accounts payable, well, half of what you did wasn't probably really necessary. So as these technologies advance, you really need to go back and say, what is the business really trying to accomplish? Not how do they do it today necessarily, but what is it that they're really trying to accomplish as a business? And how do we better support that with this new technology? So all the technology changes, but the why we're creating the technology really hasn't changed. And we have to just continually remind ourselves that we have to go, invariably go back to the customer and talk again about what they're trying to accomplish with their business. And don't just say how you're going to hit their current system and make it better, because that current system may not even be the right starting point, right? You need to think about, no, what are you trying to accomplish? And if we'd never built anything before, what would we build now in order to solve this problem?
Yeah, and to your point, setting, knowing, and aligning on strategy is even more important when there is so much disruption. I mean, there's so many shiny balls to be chased. So really having a full clarity on what it is that you're trying to accomplish is so important. And last year you dropped a heavy dose of wisdom in the form of a Strategy 101 paper. So you talked about your MVP concept in that paper and why it works. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And would you change anything in this ambiguity age?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Thank you for that, for the nice note. I mean, honestly, like most things in my career, I've stolen most of it. I would say I went through half my career not really understanding the importance of strategy. And partly, if you work at a place like Oracle and someone like Larry Ellison's running the show, he's kind of the strategy, right? If you're at Apple, Steve Jobs, kind of the strategy, right? So the strategy kind of evolves from when you have these sort of amazing, innovators and they have this vision, or like Judy Faulkner at Epic, who kind of revolutionized and created the electronic medical record, completely changed the healthcare industry. These people have a clear vision of where things need to go, and the whole company just sort of rallies behind that. But for us mortals, when you're trying to basically, think about how do you basically set the right priorities for your team, you have to start with a destination, right? There's what is it out of, Alice in Wonderland? If you don't have any destination, any road will get you there. I think the company that's really done kind of an amazing job with this is Salesforce, with their whole V2MOM process. And V2MOM is, think of it as sort of an OKR, objectives and key results framework on steroids. And so V2MOM was sort of the basis of creating this MVP, which is, mission, values, and priorities. And the idea is, mission, why do you exist as an organization? What difference are you trying to make in the world? And it's not just to make money or to build software, to be the market leader, right? It's, it should be something that is, in a way emotional, something that is going to help transform and make the world a better place. There's a company I've been working with called Bentley Systems, and they build design systems, basically for engineers building infrastructure, bridges, power plants, roadways. And they have a very strong mission about making the world a better place. They literally physically connect the world, and they're building the software to help organizations do that. And so their mission is very much about connecting the world. And it's bigger than software. It's something that says, this is how we're going to make our customers successful. So mission is really important because it's something everyone ought to be able to connect to. As they think about what they're doing every day, how do they connect to that mission? Values is really about, you've heard the expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've never really liked that term very much. It sounds a little bit too aggressive, but the whole idea of a culture of a company, I think, is so important. I grew up in Palo Alto where we had Hewlett Packard. Never talked about the HP way. It was a great company. It was a company that was really connected. They were curious people. They loved building products. You know, Bill and Dave walked around talking to engineers about cool things they were working on. It was this feeling that they were making a difference. You know, they had a set of values that everybody understood. And the idea of talking about values within a company is, I think, really critical, because when you have to make tough decisions, what's going to guide you? And the idea is value should guide you. We're customer centric, like we're trustworthy, we're innovative. Like the terms that you use in defining those values really define in a way can help define the culture in your company. And then, you know, priorities is about, you know, what are you going to do to deliver on that mission? And the important thing about priorities is understanding you only get a certain number, right? So many companies walk around thinking, oh, here's 50 things we're going to do this year. Well, what's the one most important one? Well, okay, that's the one you have to do. Great, write that down. What's number 2? Write that down. And at some point you get to 5 or 6 or 7, and you have to stop writing because there's no more people to throw at these things. And the idea that there's a capacity, and that, you know, if everything's important, nothing's important. So you have to sit down and say, this is the most important thing for us to get done. And so the idea with MVP is to create a framework that everyone understands what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, the culture you're trying to create within that organization, and the things you're committing to delivering. And in the MVP framework, I mean, there's a few, I think, things that are really important. One is it's an incredibly transparent process. So at the top of the company, the leadership team works on it, but once it's done, it's not done, right? It's sent out to the entire organization, and you ask for feedback from the organization. And I remember the first time I did this outside of Salesforce, it was actually at SAP, and I did this MVP process, and we sent it out to our teams. I'm waiting for the feedback. Week later, crickets. Nobody's giving us feedback. Okay, that's not going to work. We literally organized meetings. We went to all the teams and we said, we're drafting you 8 people. Come into this room. We're going to go through. And they were like, first thing was like, are you serious? You really want feedback from us? Yeah, we really want feedback from you. And they were shocked. But we took the feedback, and we, based on their feedback, there were things, blind spots we as a leadership team had totally, that the people who actually had to deliver against this, they saw. And so it got better because we took their feedback.
John, I think that was one of the things about your paper that really stood out to me was how much of your belief in transparency and inclusiveness and having true feedback float upwards, just in general as your philosophy, how much that came through with this paper. Yeah, so, that's great.
I think it was this first great manager I had who told me this thing. She said, you know, the CEO of a company makes a lot of important decisions, but the people who write the code at the bottom make 10,000 decisions. And if those 10,000 decisions are not made in the context of what you're trying to accomplish, the chance of you getting them right is almost zero. So like connecting everybody to that mission, and it's not just connecting them. The thing about going through a process like this, and the reason why I want to get people's input is, it's not just I want them to understand what the mission is. I want them to feel like they helped create it, right? That they have a sense of ownership in it. And by the way, in going through this process, when I've done this with new companies and a new group, it is very likely you lose a person or two in that process. Not because they're bad people, because they have a very different idea about what you should be trying to accomplish. So I did this at SAP. I'd taken over this group that was a bunch of different acquisitions, and they all had their own ideas about what they should be doing. In the end, I wanted one idea for all of those groups. Like, we were going to go the same direction. We were part of SAP. Yeah, there was one mission. And a couple people out of that process said, I get what you're doing. This is not what I want to be doing. But it's much better to find that out immediately than to have a bunch of product releases go by and to find out, why are they building this product that really isn't the direction we thought we've agreed to go. So, part of this is you want a sense of ownership, you want a sense of commitment to it and responsibility for it. So, the MVP starts at the top and then it descends down through the organization. So every team builds their own MVP, it connects to the MVP above it, and then it works down through the organization. So everybody kind of understands. I mean, the thing you want to get out of this is everybody, every day someone walks into the office and they're doing the work that they need to get done that day, but they understand how it's helping you as an organization achieve your bigger mission. And if what they're working on doesn't, they raise their hand, they say, I don't think this fits. Why are we doing this? And you're like, great question.
Right. I think that uncovering blind spots is so important. I think it was Jim Collins, this concept of the commander's intent, like helping, like the point of people understanding the strategic goals and mission is to not only help them make those decisions, but to really internalize what success looks like. Because without that clarity, again, people try to do the right thing, but they don't have the context to make the best decisions. And so then you end up with decisions that are not grounded in the reality of work, which is a really big problem. And especially in today's world where we're reimagining and deciding which work is going to happen and which work isn't going to happen and by whom, and having a lot of reshuffling around things, all of those blind spots become vulnerabilities for us if we do not have those kind of feedback loops.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And, it's interesting. One of the things I every time there's a new technology revolution, right, the iPhone or whatever, it seems like everyone throws the whole strategy out the window. They kind of go, okay, that doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is getting out of the iPhone. All that matters now is everything has to be in AI. All right, what problem? Great. I'm 100% in on AI. It's one of the most, if not the most transformational technology I've seen in my long history in this industry. But it's still technology that needs to be applied to a problem. So what is that problem you're going to solve? Yeah, I've seen some amazing startups doing things with AI, and I think most of them kind of got it right. There's some healthcare startups doing things with AI that, assuming they don't get squished by the legacy vendors, I think will help transform, healthcare. And the good thing is most of them I've talked to, they are starting in the right place. I mean, they understand the technology, and it's hard for them not to just talk about the technology for 90% of the meeting. But most of them are doing it for a reason. Like they look at like healthcare and they see an industry that is incredibly broken, right? Data rich, information poor, right? Physicians who aren't making decisions based on data, but based on intuition and their own personal experience, which is great. God bless them. They're people who are doctors and nurses are amazing people. But imagine those people armed with insight from healthcare information across the country that AI could give them. I think the opportunity to transform, all aspects of our work, of how we work and how industries work is huge for AI. But it still takes a human being to describe what problem you're trying to solve and to direct it in some way. I'm a little worried about all the discussions going on now about, loyalty is going to end now for companies. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my goodness, like, have we totally got this one? Like, I couldn't be more in stronger disagreement than people are saying this is going to change. The whole contract between companies and people is going to get blown up because of this. I hope not anyway. I certainly hope that is not the case.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be important to know your value outside of the company that you're working for, I think, regardless. So you had written this paper a year ago, and to your point, in the meantime, there has been this AI frenzy. So is there anything that you would change or emphasize further a year later?
I think the one thing that I might call out a bit is that, I think part of the defining your mission now has to involve more dialogue with the customers you're trying to serve, right? So I think understanding, because this to me is where it gets a little trickier. It's like backing a trailer up. You're not quite sure if turning left is going to make you go right or right's going to make you go left or what. But, customers are trying
Retirement
to figure out.
jokes. I love them.
The customers are trying to figure out what all this means to them as well. Right? They're trying to figure out, what does AI do on the shop floor? What is AI going to do for procurement? What is AI going to do for customer service? What is AI, do I need a customer service, leader? Yes, you do.
Yeah.
I think. So, having conversations with customers that are not, I have all the answers, but like, let's go into the conversation. Let's not talk about the current product you're running from us. Let's talk about where you think your business is going. What are your competitors doing that's interesting? What are your customers asking you about? Like, what is the expectation? What are you worried about? How is this changing, your supply chain? How is this changing how you think about, like, all the aspects of how you run this business? What do you think is going to be challenged because of this? I think it's going to take a really, transparent and somewhat vulnerable, is a funny word to use, but almost vulnerable discussion. Like, walk in and say, I don't really know where this is all going. Like, we built some cool stuff. We think it's going to help. But, a year from now, that could all be different.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, John. I was just talking to a strategy and transformation leader, and she was saying that, as they started to tackle AI initiatives and AI transformations, they realized that they needed to put in what they called product management rigor into it. And, some of that is, how do you look at current state and future state analysis? But, really good product management is all about knowing how to interview and extract wisdom from customers, right? So I think that fits perfectly.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's always been true, but I think that becomes like, and the problem is,
well, this is for AI initiatives, not product initiatives, but so not the product itself, but just how you leverage AI within an organization.
It's interesting. One of the things, there were two very large software vendors who both jumped on the agentic AI bandwagon very early, very quickly, and I watched both of them give product presentations. It was interesting because both of them are very good at what they do, right? They both focus kind of on the CRM side of the world. And they have great solutions, very good customer success, both great companies. But they jumped on this agentic bandwagon, and literally they were in we got more bots than the other guys. I mean, they didn't say it that way, but it was like the whole thing was about, look at this library of bots. And by the way, here's one you can build now. So we're going to show you how to build one. And it's like, and they did a very lightweight kind of a problem to show it, but they didn't really talk about, like, this could totally change the way your service organization works. This could totally change your internal IT function in a really positive way, make them much more productive, much happier in their job. They jumped into they really became enamored with that technology and lost the thread a little bit on why. And so, I think one of the things is the reason why I think the strategy is so important is that it will always bring you back to the why. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And, it might be the year you completely make bigger revisions to your mission than you would otherwise because of that. And I think what AI is going to do is force you to really have those conversations with the customers who are trying to figure that out at exactly the same time.
So one of the questions Amy and I are pondering, and I'm curious your point of view on this, is what is the advantage for an incumbent versus a new company, and kind of where do you think that will level out? Because obviously rethinking has some advantage to just starting over, but but big companies do have data and customer relationships. So how do you weigh the cost benefit, and who would you advantage in this world of transformation to AI thinking?
I think it kind of depends on the speed with which it's likely to have an impact. Some industries are simply more willing to embrace change faster, right? The public sector space, not going to go that fast, right? Their procurement processes are not going to switch to AI. They're going to go slow. I work with a company that's focused on defense tech, and they're building amazing stuff. It is still a slog, right? It just takes a long time to go through the process, and they all get it. Like, it's not like the people individually don't get it. It's just, it's a it's a structure within that industry that doesn't move very fast. And so I think part of it's going to come down to kind of the industry. I think the other part is a little bit a function of the incumbents. So it's interesting this time. I mean, AI's been around for a while. I mean, when I was at Salesforce, we bought a dozen AI companies trying to figure it out, right? Just kept writing checks. New guys came in, they would talk about what they were doing. It was fascinating. Never quite figured out exactly what it took a while till it was really generative AI. I think that everybody really woke up and said, "Oh my goodness, it can create things. It's not just about finding the patterns in data; it's actually creating things." Like we never had thought that was going to become real so fast. And I think everyone overnight flipped. And so I think the incumbents are much more aware of the need to get on this quickly. Whereas remember when cloud came, a lot of the incumbents were like, that's for SMBs.
We got lots of time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they kind of lost it. So, I mean, they eventually caught up, but it was definitely harder. So I think this time the incumbents they're definitely moving more quickly. But they still have a legacy code base that they have to protect. And so I think the most innovative things are really coming from complete startups. But honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure which bet I would take at this point, because there's an advantage in owning the customers. There's an advantage in having a 1,000-person sales organization. There's a huge advantage in owning all the data already. Even if it's technically the customers, it's amazing how it can be a bureaucratic process to get at that data when you own it as the cloud provider. So I'm not sure how it's going to go. I think some of the greatest innovations are going to come out of the startup world. There was an interesting post on LinkedIn today by a startup in the health tech space that was not very happy about what Epic was doing with their AI scribing technology, because they've kind of copied what everyone else was doing, and they have a great market position. So at a minimum, the startups are going to make the incumbents go faster and copy some of the innovation that they're doing.
Yeah, and so you're doing VC advisory now, right, John?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, and so what are you learning with that? What patterns are you seeing? What are you excited about?
There is not a company we've talked to that's not an AI company.
Yeah.
So not surprising. I think, the interesting thing is everybody's starting with AI. I mean, I have to say I've been incredibly impressed. Now, generally we look at companies, after Series A, so it's not angel investing. So there's been a certain amount of vetting and sort of due diligence before I take a look at them. But so just sort of from that standpoint, understand they're somewhat proven by the point we get involved. But I'm really impressed with the fearlessness with which some of these folks are looking at these problems. I mean, these are hard problems, like in healthcare and defense, in service, in procurement, and they're going up against some pretty big legacy vendors, and they're completely fearless. They really believe their solution is way better than what exists in the market. And honestly, they're right. I mean, they still have to execute, right? There's one thing to have a great idea, turning it into code that customers can run and deploy effectively and operate smoothly and, innovate on, next week. That's still, muscle they need to develop. But the fact is their ideas are right. They've built some amazing technology. They start with AI. They assume the data exists, and then they solve the problem from that perspective. So they're starting in absolutely the right place, and they are unafraid of taking on multi-billion-dollar companies, which is really fun to see.
Yeah, and are you seeing that they're doing it with very different business models under the helm, not just in how they price, but also in how they build products? Or
so the thing I've seen, and I can't differentiate between it, is this is different or it's just a function of the maturity of the company, right? The development is 100% on point, right? Generally speaking, you have a very, a lot of overlap between what you would call development and what you call service. And some of that I think is right? When you're trying to prove the model initially, you want to make sure you get it right. You want and by the way, I've never been a fan of product talks to the customer, product then talks to engineering, right? I want engineering and product to talk together to the customer. And they're doing that. They're doing, I think the startups are really understanding the need that in order to move quickly, you need everybody to really understand the customer problem in a pretty intimate way. But they're really on point with product, and to the point where a lot of times I give them the advice of, okay, that's great. Understand you're not a consulting company, right? You're a product company. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure you can manage the customer at some point to make sure that is a relationship and that's the business you're actually going into. But that sense of, product is really on point. Product is really at the tip of the spear as they're trying to create this new market. I think is something that's really, really interesting to see.
And what sort of pricing models are you seeing take off and stick?
Well, I think that is, I think that is still being worked out, right? I think it's the conversation. It's the part of the conversation we're having where pretty much every time they're going, we're figuring that out. I mean, it's almost like with every opportunity they're doing now, they're just trying to say, I think we can get $1 million from it. Like we're going to save them, 5 million, so I think we can get $1 million from them. It's like based on what metric? Well, that we're still trying to figure that out. And it's people are like, we've done user pricing, now we're trying to do some kind of consumption pricing, but when what's being consumed is going to be continually diminished, I'm not sure how a consumption pricing model works.
Exactly.
So
Right.
you could efficient way right out of any revenue whatsoever, which obviously doesn't work.
Yeah, and also the value one in a somewhat similar way. If you're thinking project based, your value creation could be, ending as opposed to recurring. And so making sure you have a sustainable business model, not just some way to capture an initial amount of revenue or value is a big thing as well.
Plus, as much as everyone likes, I think theoretically the idea of some sort of a consumption pricing model, both sides also want predictability.
Yes.
So that's the other part that makes this more complicated.
Yeah. And consumption does not have good predictability.
Right.
It harkens
No.
back. It harkens back to a teenager using a consumption-based phone plan and
I
scaring.
mean, you have a bunch of agentic processes, like they're not users, they're not, what are they exactly?
So that gets us to our final question. We have one big idea that we like to think about, and that is unlearning, right? So when we think about the wealth of experience and expertise that we've built up over the years, figuring out which pieces are ones that help you going forward and which pieces are ones to prune as things change. Have you uncovered anything in your own thinking that you've shed over the years as maybe used to be helpful but isn't anymore based on where the world is today?
Yeah, I mean, I've shed lots of learnings, but not always intentionally and not always for my benefit. I just think it's a function of things get full up there and new things push old things out. Yeah, I don't know if it's unlearning exactly, but I do think, the ideas I was brought up with around organizational structures, those hierarchical models, I think are, they're not unimportant, but I think in a world in which you're trying to innovate at speed and build around a customer model, like I'm not sure hierarchy is the best effect. There's a really interesting gentleman I met last year who is the former chief scientist at Xerox PARC, who helped create things like the graphical user interface and the mouse. So he has kind of an interesting history. But he's been focused on this thing called organizational jazz, like new models for how people work together that actually models more like jazz music, where it's all improv. And it's like all the musicians kind of know where they're trying to get to, but they are not structured in how they go about doing it. And he's written kind of a whole thesis on how people need to work together. I mean, it's kind of like what you'd see, when people do like a tech jam, right? And teams get together kind of ad hoc and build something for fun, right? It's that kind of innovation and thought process. And I think, the thing I think that we'll need to look at in the future that will mean unlearning the structures we're all used to and comfortable with is the way we organize. And maybe there's a structure for HR, but maybe the way we actually execute in terms of delivering products is going to be much more freeform.
I think you had a little vision of this, though, more than a decade ago when you were working on work.com. And you said the following: a social enterprise engenders a feeling of happy people coming together to achieve a common goal. By contrast, Human capital management sounds like a process for turning people into livestock for the company slaughterhouse.
How did you remember that?
Our historian.
Well, I mean, the idea of work.com was that HR systems were built for HR, which is great, right? That's the very important processes, but they'd never really been built for teams trying to work together. And maybe we should think about that. And then, it didn't quite work out. So maybe the idea was an
Oh
idea
no, you were just
good,
ahead
but
of
not
your
quite
time.
ready.
It's
Before
happening.
your time.
It's happening.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Good.
All right, shall we move to Leadership Corner?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Question is, I just got promoted to manager. I've never managed anyone before, even though I am quite senior at my company, and now I will have a team of 5. What are the first things I should do, and what should I watch out for?
Well, I think the first thing to do, obviously, is, meet with your team, talk with them, get to know them. I think the first thing to do is to recognize that you do have a different job, right? I'm not one of 6 now, right? I have a different role. My job is to make the team successful. Ultimately, that's my job. If you do not already have a goal, an objective for your team, that's really the first thing to try to create, right? Think about, putting a structure in place where you actually have a real mission for your team, right? Get them to help create that mission. And through that process of creating it, you will start building that kind of team structure and the connections to those folks that I think you will want to have as a leader going forward.
So yeah, I love that. And you had written a piece about first-time management, I think, as well, that you're drawing on. I think it's so important to really understand how each person on your team ticks. So, what's their work style, what motivates them, and what are their strengths as they see it. So really listening and learning from that, and recognizing that each person brings something different to the table, different strengths and different contexts, different histories, and so on. I think that's super important. The other thing is really making sure that the team is a cohesive group. And so I personally just love having various assessments. There's so many different kinds of assessments out there, but making that transparent to everyone on the team, so everyone understands how each other ticks and what their strengths are. And one of the funnest kind of group activities that I really like, so you want to go to each person and understand their thoughts and perspectives, but would be fun to assemble your team of 5 and have them share with you in front of each other what each other's strengths are. So you can hear, and because this is really self-affirming for each of the individuals and the team together, and it's a great way for you to learn about the team in a different way.
Yeah, I've done some of that before, Amy, and one of the things is I've had everybody use the Strengths Finders and do the Strengths Finder quiz so that they could be sharing from the same rubric. I think that is
That's
helpful.
a great assessment.
Yeah, but there's lots of them. But I just think like having everybody under the same exercise of getting clarity and using the same language is helpful in that. One thing that I always do when helping people step into management for the first time is I really recommend that they get some formal education. At Oracle, we used to have a great training for this, but if you're in a smaller organization, you probably have to search it out a little bit on managing within the law. There are some tripwires as a new manager that you should be more aware of in your behavior and how you engage with your team. So just getting, a good overview of how to think about that, I think matters. I think the other thing is reminding yourself that we all tend to like people that have similar strengths as us. So back to the understanding the strengths of the team. learning to value and support people who have different ways of approaching their work is going to matter, especially because you're already a senior person. So you've already built a lot of expertise, and you might tend to judge quality of other people's expertise based on how you work. So management is a time to let go a little bit of the self-reflection of the quality of work and give that in service to the team's quality of work. So building your own identity on supporting others as opposed to making it about what you can do and how they compare to what you can do.
I think the last thing I'd say is, give yourself time. Like your first management role, you're going to engage with people, you're going to try to do a good job. You will make mistakes. Don't be too hard on yourself too quickly, at least, and give yourself the time and be continually aware that your responsibility now is team success, not just individual success. And that's kind of the thing you need to give yourself continual reminders on.
Love it. Well, this has been delightful.
So great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Drop in more wisdom. Love it. Thank you. All right, well, another great one. So wonderful to hear from the wise and amazing John Wookey on how strategy and first principles are the most important thing that you can be thinking about when you're planning your AI transformations, etc.
Yeah, I just loved how he was able to break it down so succinctly, but to remind us all that there's a lot about how we serve our customers that we need to go back and reimagine and rethink. So really great conversation.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, seriously, send us your Leadership Corner questions. We love them. And subscribe, share, spread the word.
Yeah, and definitely continue reading the recaps. Amy's been doing an amazing job on the recaps. We now have a newsletter. We have so much Meg and Amy Show content for you. So thank you, everyone, for supporting us. Let's invent the future together. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.